An entire Roman army had been destroyed. Its commander was dead, and its survivors were dragged away in chains. The greatest military machine on earth had just suffered one of its worst humiliations. But this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Rome conquered Britain. It conquered Gaul. It conquered Greece. It conquered Egypt. Kingdom after kingdom fell beneath its legions. So why, after nearly 3 centuries of war, could Rome never conquer one empire? An empire with no giant walls, no massive infantry, an enemy that seemed to disappear whenever Rome attacked, and strike whenever Rome looked away. The answer begins with one man, not a legendary general, but its richest citizen. In 53 BC, Marcus Licinius Crassus had everything a Roman could dream of: power, influence, and more wealth than almost anyone alive. But whenever people spoke of Rome's greatest men, they remembered Julius Caesar. They remembered Pompey. Crassus hated that. Gold could buy almost anything. It couldn't buy glory. So he decided to earn it the only way Rome truly respected: conquest. His target was the Parthian Empire. Most Romans expected another quick victory, another kingdom, another name added to Rome's growing empire. Instead, they were marching toward an enemy unlike any they had ever faced, an enemy that almost never stood still. You couldn't pin them down. You couldn't force them into battle. And if you thought they were running, that was usually when you were already dead. Crassus's advisors begged him not to invade. They warned him about the endless desert. They warned him about riders who seemed to appear from nowhere, then vanish beyond the horizon. They warned him this wasn't the kind of war Rome knew how to win. Crassus listened, then ignored every word. He believed 40,000 Roman legionaries could solve any problem. He was about to discover that some enemies don't defeat Rome with strength. They defeat Rome with patience. The deeper the army marched, the stranger the world became. The villages were empty. The wells had been abandoned. Even the birds seemed to disappear. The only thing that moved was the wind, dragging sand across thousands of Roman footprints. Hour after hour, 40,000 men marched deeper into the wilderness. No enemy, no battle, only the growing feeling that they weren't alone. Somewhere beyond the endless waves of dust, thousands of unseen eyes followed every step they took, waiting, not to defend an empire, but to trap one. Then, the silence broke. A slow, heavy beat echoed across the desert. Drums, not loud enough to frighten the Romans, just loud enough to make them wonder. Then the horsemen appeared, not charging, not shouting, just watching, like hunters studying wounded prey. Crassus smiled. Finally, an enemy. He ordered the advance. The riders turned and drifted away. Exactly as expected. The Romans followed. The farther they marched, the farther the riders slipped into the endless sea of sand. Always close enough to see, never close enough to catch. The chase had begun. Then everything changed. Without warning, thousands of boughs rose into the air. The sky darkened. A storm of arrows screamed toward the Roman line. Men collapsed before they even understood what was happening. Horses crashed into the sand. Shields shuddered beneath the relentless impact as arrows slipped through gaps in armor and found exposed faces, arms, legs. The legionaries did what they had done for centuries. They locked their shields together against almost every enemy. That formation was unstoppable. Against the Parthians, it became a prison. Every minute they stood still, another storm of arrows crashed into them. When they charged, the horse archers melted back into the desert. When the Romans slowed to breathe, the riders twisted in their saddles and fired backward with terrifying accuracy. The Romans had never fought an enemy like this. You couldn't catch them. You couldn't outrun them. You couldn't make them fight. You could only survive until you couldn't. Then came another shock. The arrows never stopped. The Romans expected the enemy to run out. Instead, camel caravans appeared behind the Parthian lines, carrying fresh bundles of arrows. The attack never slowed. Minute after minute, hour after hour, the desert disappeared beneath broken shields, dead horses, and wounded soldiers crying out for water. Crassus was running out of options, so he made the decision that sealed the army's fate. He ordered his son, Publius, to attack. The young commander charged forward with thousands of cavalry and infantry. At first, it worked. The Parthians fled. Publius chased them, faster, farther, deeper into the desert. Then, the horsemen stopped. More riders appeared, then more, then hundreds more. Within moments, Publius and his men were completely surrounded. Arrows poured in from every direction. Those who survived the barrage were met by armored cataphracts crashing into them with massive lances. Realizing there was no escape, Publius chose death over capture. A short time later, the Parthians rode back toward the Roman army, held high above the battlefield. Was Publius's severed head. The message needed no translation. Your sons, your generals, your empire, none of them are safe here. At that moment, the battle was already over. The Romans simply hadn't realized it yet. Crassus tried to save what remained of his army under cover of darkness. Confusion spread. Units became separated. Many were cut down trying to escape. Thousands surrendered. Crassus himself was killed during failed negotiations the following day. Later writers claim molten gold was poured into his mouth to mock his greed. Though that story may be legend rather than fact, the truth didn't need embellishment. Rome had suffered one of the greatest defeats in its history, and the strangest part, this wasn't a one-time disaster. Rome returned, again and again. New generals, new emperors, new armies. Sometimes Rome won battles, sometimes the Parthians did. Cities changed hands, borders shifted. But after nearly 3 centuries of war, Rome never permanently conquered the Parthian Empire. Not because Rome lacked courage, not because its soldiers lacked skill, but because it had finally met an enemy that refused to fight by Rome's rules. The empire that conquered Britain, Gaul, Greece, and Egypt had finally reached its limit, and that limit waited patiently, on horseback, in the deserts of the East, because even the greatest empire in history could not conquer everything.